I never thought accepting a neighbor's kindness would destroy everything I believed about love, loyalty, and myself. Sometimes life doesn't shatter with a bang, it cracks quietly, like a windshield hit by a small stone. You don't notice the damage at first. But then, with time, the crack spreads. It takes over everything. And suddenly, you're staring at the pieces of a life you don't even recognize anymore. That's what happened to me. It's been over a year now, but I still remember the exact smell in the air that day: warm asphalt, freshly cut grass, and the faint scent of barbecue drifting from down the block. I remember the sound of my phone buzzing over and over again in my bag, and the silence that followed when I realized my husband wasn't going to pick up. And I remember him. Jason. My neighbor. Kind eyes. Always said hello. Always offered help I never thought I'd need. I didn't know then that the smallest, most innocent "Are you okay?" could unlock something so dangerous inside me, something I didn't even know I'd buried. If you'd told me a year ago that a flat tire would change my life, I would have laughed. Or maybe I would have cried, depending on the day. I was tired. Not just physically tired, but the kind of tired that lives in your bones. The kind of tired that comes from feeling unseen for too long. Forgotten. Like wallpaper in your own home. And when someone, anyone, finally looks at you like you matter again, it does something to you. It stirs something. You start asking questions you've avoided for years. You start wondering, is this all my life is ever going to be? I wish I could say I stopped it before it ever started. I wish I could say I didn't enjoy the way he looked at me, the way he listened, the way he noticed. But I can't. I'd be lying if I said I didn't lean into it, just a little. At first. Just a little attention. Just a little comfort. Just a little warmth in a house that had grown so cold, even my own shadow felt distant. But just a little has a way of turning into way too much when you're starving for connection. And before I knew it, there I was. In my kitchen. Crying alone. A broken picture frame on the floor. My husband upstairs unaware. And Jason. Packing up a moving truck, refusing to even look me in the eyes. That day still plays in my head like a scene from a movie I never auditioned for. The truth is, I didn't mean to fall into anything. But sometimes, life doesn't ask for permission. It just happens. And once it does, you can't go back. You can only live with the fallout. This story, my story, isn't simple. It's not black and white. It's about loneliness and timing and choices you never imagined yourself making. It's about guilt. And longing. And the aching hope that someone might finally see you again. So, if you're still listening, if you've ever felt like love skipped over you, if you've ever wanted to scream and cry and be held all at the same time, then stay with me. Because you won't believe what happened next. Subscribe to Heartfelt Tales Unfold for true stories that cut to the heart. This one changed everything for me. It all started with a flat tire and ended with a secret I still can't say out loud. But today, I'll try. I'm 42. Married. 2 teenage kids. From the outside, it looks like I have a nice life. A stable marriage. A quiet home in a clean suburban neighborhood. I smile at the neighbors, drop off casseroles when someone's sick, wave at passing cars like clockwork. It's the kind of place where everything looks fine on the surface. But behind that front door, it's silent. Not peaceful. Just empty. My husband, Greg, is a good man on paper. Steady job, pays the bills, doesn't drink, doesn't yell. But somewhere along the line, he stopped being present. He started spending more time in front of his laptop than looking me in the eyes. Always typing, always busy. Even dinner turned into a side note. He'd eat standing up, phone in one hand, barely tasting anything. At first, I made excuses. He's tired. Work is stressful. This is just a phase. But the phase became a pattern. Then a lifestyle. He stopped asking how my day was. Stopped noticing when I wore something new. Stopped touching me at all. Months would pass without a single kiss that wasn't just routine. And I started to fade. You know what it feels like to walk into a room and feel like you're not even there? To make a comment and have it fall flat, like you spoke into an empty hallway? That was my life every day. The kids, well, they're teenagers. They have their own world. Phones, friends, slamming doors. They come down for food, grumble through a few words, then disappear again. I don't blame them. They're just growing up. But it's lonely. There's no laughter in the house anymore. No warmth. Just footsteps, the hum of electronics, and long stretches of silence. And then there's Jason. He moved in about 6 months before the tire incident. I noticed him right away, not because he was striking or loud. Quite the opposite. He was quiet, calm. There was a gentleness about him. He kept to himself, mostly. No kids. Just him and his dog, Baxter. I heard from another neighbor that he'd recently gone through a divorce. I didn't ask for details, but there was a sadness in his eyes the first time we spoke. A kind of shared understanding, though we hadn't exchanged more than a few words. He always waved when he saw me. Sometimes he'd nod while jogging by. But there was a steadiness in him, something solid, something simple. I didn't think much of it then. But now, when I look back, I think I noticed that quiet strength because it was the very thing missing from my own home. My days had become predictable. I'd wake up, make breakfast no one said thank you for, clean a house no one noticed, run errands in silence, and come back to a man who barely looked up. I didn't expect magic anymore. I just wanted to feel something again. Anything. I didn't realize how numb I'd become until the numbness started to lift. Jason didn't do anything grand. He didn't flirt or push or make any inappropriate moves. He just saw me. When we'd pass each other, he looked me in the eyes. When I spoke, he listened. Not distracted. Not half smiling while checking his phone. Fully present. Like I mattered. I didn't even realize how much I missed that until he offered it. That contrast was hard to ignore. My house was quiet, but not the comforting kind. It was cold. Predictable. Sterile. Everything had its place. Laundry folded perfectly. Dishes always done. Meals on time. But there was no life in it. Meanwhile, outside those walls, the neighborhood buzzed with small joys. Kids playing in driveways. Dogs barking. Laughter from backyard barbecues. Music from open garage doors on Saturdays. Life was happening all around me, and I was stuck in a home that felt like a waiting room for something that never came. I kept telling myself it was just a rough patch. That maybe, if I held on a little longer, Greg would come back to me. The man who used to bring me coffee in bed. Who used to touch the small of my back when I was cooking. Who used to ask about my dreams and mean it. But he never did. And eventually, I stopped believing he would. That's when the ache settled in. Not the sharp kind, but the dull, aching kind. The one that sits in your chest and never leaves. The one that gets louder every time someone shows you just a little bit of kindness. That's the emotional space I was in when Jason stepped in to help with my flat tire. Not searching, not planning, just existing, waiting for something to shake me awake. I just didn't expect it to be him. It was a Thursday. Late afternoon slipping into early evening, and the sky had that heavy, moody look, like it couldn't decide whether to rain or just hang there, gray and tired. I'd just finished a long, errand-filled day. Groceries in the trunk, a headache slowly building behind my eyes, and all I could think about was getting home and maybe, just maybe, Greg would have started dinner without me reminding him. I turned the key to start the car and all I heard was a sputter. Then nothing. I tried again. Still nothing. I looked down and noticed the dashboard light blinking red, and then I got out, walked around the car and saw it. The front tire. Flat as paper. I stood there for a second, just staring at it. I wasn't even angry. I was too tired to be angry. Just deflated, like the tire itself. I pulled out my phone and called Greg. Voicemail. I called again. Straight to voicemail this time. No message. No text. No, are you okay? I stared at the screen for a while, thumb hovering, debating whether to call a service or maybe my son, though I knew he'd be out with friends, barely checking his phone. That's when I heard a voice behind me. You need help. I turned. It was Jason. Holding a bag of dog food, leash wrapped around his wrist, Baxter sitting obediently beside him. He was calm, casual, no panic in his voice, just concern. Gentle concern. And the way he looked at me, it caught me off guard. Not because it was intense or dramatic, but because it was real. He wasn't rushing. He wasn't distracted. He wasn't half listening while planning what he'd say next. He was just there. I hadn't felt that in a long time. I tried to wave him off at first. Told him it was just a flat. That I'd call someone. But he stepped closer, set the dog food down in the grass, and crouched beside the tire before I could even finish. "Let me take a look," he said. "It's no big deal." And the way he said it, like helping me was the most natural thing in the world, it disarmed me. Completely. He didn't make a show of it. Didn't ask for anything. He just quietly opened the trunk, pulled out the spare, and got to work. I stood there, fumbling for words, feeling suddenly out of place in my own life. I tried to make conversation, something light about the weather, but he just smiled up at me from under the car and said, "You don't have to talk if you don't feel like it. I'm just here to help." That got to me, because I realized, in that moment, that no one had asked how I felt in a long time, let alone told me it was okay not to perform, not to fill the silence, not to hold everything together. 15 minutes later, the spare was on and the car was good to go. I thanked him, tried to insist I'd be fine driving home. But he looked at the sky, still gray, now with a low rumble somewhere in the distance, and said, "I'll walk with you, just in case something else goes wrong." It was barely 3 blocks, but it felt like the longest, most intimate walk I'd taken in years. We didn't talk much, just enough. He asked me how long we'd lived in the neighborhood. I told him about the kids, about my husband's job. He nodded, didn't pry, just listened, really listened. And when I mentioned I'd been married for almost 20 years, he glanced sideways at me and said, "That's a long time. Must take a lot of strength." I didn't know what to say to that, because it did take strength. But not the kind people think. Not the strength of love enduring. More like the strength it takes to stay standing when everything inside you is sinking. When we reached my driveway, I turned to him to say goodbye, and for a moment, neither of us moved. The porch light came on. The crickets started humming. It felt like the world was holding its breath. And he just said, "If you ever need anything, I'm just down the street." Simple. Straightforward. No innuendo. No pressure. But it stayed with me. I went inside. The house was dark. My husband was upstairs. The kids were in their rooms. No one had noticed I was late. No one asked where I'd been. I put the groceries away in silence. The kind of silence that doesn't welcome you. It isolates you. And that night, as I lay in bed next to Greg, him snoring lightly, one arm over his chest like always, I closed my eyes and expected to feel the usual numbness. But instead, I saw Jason's face. The way he looked at me when I spoke. The way he made space for me, not just physically, but emotionally. It was the first time in years someone looked at me like I mattered. And I couldn't stop thinking about it. That night, I lay next to Greg in the same bed we'd shared for almost 2 decades, and I'd never felt more alone. He didn't even stir when I got into bed. Just turned over, mumbling something incoherent, already deep in sleep. That used to mean comfort. Safety. Now, it just meant distance. The kind of distance that no conversation could bridge anymore, not because we were angry or broken, but because we'd quietly stopped seeing each other. And there I was, thinking about Jason. Not in some dramatic, scandalous way. No, it was quieter than that. Simpler. I kept replaying the way he looked at me when I said something small, something ordinary, like how the seasons in this neighborhood reminded me of my hometown. He had this way of focusing like my words weren't background noise, like they mattered. I told myself it wasn't wrong, that it was just refreshing, just a neighbor being kind, that it was okay to enjoy the feeling of being heard. But deep down, something didn't sit right. Not because of what he'd done, but because of what I'd felt. Because as much as I tried to brush it off, the truth was undeniable. I missed being seen. I missed being chosen. And I didn't know how much until Jason showed up at just the right time and simply noticed me. The next day, I went about my usual routine: laundry, grocery list, answering emails no one would ever read, but something felt different. Everything Greg did started to look smaller under the weight of that difference. He didn't say good morning. Didn't ask if I got home okay the night before. He didn't even ask why I was quiet over breakfast. It was like I'd faded into the background, and he'd gotten used to the outline of me, not the actual person. And that's when the guilt started. Not for anything I'd done, but for how I'd started to feel. For the flutter in my chest when I heard Jason's dog bark in the distance. For the way I found myself pausing near the window, watching for that flash of his red hoodie during his morning run. It was innocent, but it didn't feel harmless. I kept telling myself, it's just human. You're just lonely. It's nothing. But the line between nothing and something felt thinner every day. A few afternoons later, I was bringing in the mail when I heard Jason's voice call out from his yard. Just a casual, "Hey, how's the tire holding up?" Nothing special. But the way he smiled, soft, knowing, a little lopsided, I felt it hit somewhere deep in my stomach. We chatted for a few minutes over the fence. Light things. Nothing risky. Just human conversation. And right before I turned to leave, he said, "You know, I've always admired how calm you are. You have this grace about you." I laughed, tried to play it off. Said something dumb like, "I think that's just exhaustion," and waved it away. But that comment stuck with me all day. All night. Long after I'd folded the last towel and loaded the dishwasher. He admired me. I couldn't remember the last time Greg said anything close to that. I couldn't remember the last time he noticed something about me that wasn't tied to chores or schedules or the kids. It made me wonder, when did I stop being someone worth admiring in his eyes? I started noticing how often I thought about Jason. Not obsessively, just like a quiet hum in the background of my mind. I'd imagine what it would feel like to have a conversation that didn't end in silence. To laugh without feeling guilty. To be touched, not out of obligation, but out of want. And still, every time the thought went too far, I pulled it back. You're married. You love your family. This is just a phase. A moment. But the problem with moments is that they pile up. One innocent encounter at a time. And eventually, they build something heavier than you expected. I didn't plan on it going any further. I didn't plan on seeing him again outside of small talk and brief waves. But then came the day he invited me into his home. It started with an invitation. Jason caught me one afternoon by the mailbox, just one of those brief, neighborly run-ins. He smiled that soft, familiar smile and said, "I'm having a few people over this weekend. Just a little backyard thing. Nothing big. You should come." He paused, almost hesitated, then added, "You and your husband, of course." I smiled. Said I'd ask. But the moment I stepped back into the house, I already knew the answer. Greg was at his desk, headphones on, eyes glued to his screen. I waited for a pause in his typing, then casually mentioned the invite. He barely looked up. "Saturday," he said. "I've got work. You can go if you want." And just like that, I was going alone. I almost didn't. I told myself it would be awkward, that I didn't really know anyone. But something inside me, something small but growing, wanted to go. Needed to go. Saturday came. I took extra time getting ready. Nothing over the top. Just a little mascara, a touch of lipstick. A dress I hadn't worn in months. It wasn't for Jason. At least that's what I told myself. His backyard was warm and lively. A few neighbors, laughter, clinking glasses, soft music humming from a speaker tucked under the porch. Baxter barked excitedly when I walked in. Jason came over immediately, offered me a drink, and introduced me around. But even in the group, it felt like it was just the two of us. He talked to me, really talked to me. Asked about things Greg hadn't brought up in years. My childhood. My dreams. The little pieces of me I'd packed away to make room for everyone else. At one point, I shivered when the breeze picked up. Jason noticed, without me saying a word, and brought over a light sweater. He helped me slip it on, fingers brushing lightly against my shoulders. Not lingering. Just enough to be felt. Later, while we were sitting near the fire pit, a small leaf got caught in my hair. He reached over gently, brushed it away with his fingertips. I laughed it off, but my heart was pounding in my chest, louder than the music. We talked for hours that night. When the others left, I stayed behind to help him clean up. That's when he opened up about his divorce. She just stopped seeing me, he said, quietly, almost like he was embarrassed by the truth. I'd come home, try to talk, try to connect, but it was like I was always interrupting something more important. I didn't say anything for a moment. Just stood there, holding a stack of empty plates, feeling the words echo in my bones. I understood him too well. That night, I went home to a dark house. Greg had already gone to bed. No questions. No welcome home. Just silence. I stood in the kitchen for a long time, not moving, not thinking, just feeling. The next day, I found myself walking by Jason's house more than usual. Sometimes with made-up reasons, a return dish, a question about the neighborhood watch, anything. He never made it weird. Always smiled. Always made time. We started texting. It began innocently enough. A thank you for the barbecue. A picture of Baxter doing something silly. Then one day, a message from him just said, thinking about our conversation. You're easy to talk to. I stared at that message for a long time. Because I knew what it meant. Not in a romantic way, but in a real way. In a you matter to me kind of way. And it wasn't long before our texts became daily. Then hourly. Inside jokes. Good mornings. Good nights. Photos of little moments throughout the day, his coffee, my blooming flowers, a funny road sign he saw while driving. Each message filled a space that had been hollow for so long. And the more we shared, the more I felt it, a thread weaving tighter between us. Pulling, tugging. It wasn't physical. Not yet. But the emotional intimacy? It was undeniable. And I couldn't stop it. Didn't want to. One night, after Greg had gone to sleep, I sat curled on the couch in the dark, phone in hand. Jason had sent a message, wish you were here. Just talking. Nothing more. Just, here. I didn't respond right away. My fingers hovered, heart racing. And when I finally typed back, all I said was, me too. But that night, it wasn't just texting anymore. The night it happened, the rain had started early. By late afternoon, the sky was bruised and rumbling, and the wind pushed through the trees like it was looking for something to knock down. I was on my way home from the store when my phone buzzed. It was Jason. He'd seen the forecast. Said the roads were flooding near his end. Told me I should swing by and wait it out. It's nasty out there, he wrote. I've got wine, candles, and Baxter's already hiding under the table. Come by. It's safer. I stared at the message for a full minute. Maybe more. I could have said no. I should have. But I didn't. The air was thick when I got there. The kind of humidity that makes your skin feel like it's wearing something heavy. The lights in his house flickered as I stepped in, and not 5 minutes later, the power went out completely. Jason lit a few candles, lined them along the windowsills, the kitchen counter, the coffee table. The glow was soft. Almost romantic. But I told myself not to read into it. We sat on the couch. Baxter curled up at our feet. He poured the wine red, full-bodied, something warm that clung to the throat. The thunder rolled in the background, steady and low, like a drumbeat we were trying to ignore. We talked. About everything. And nothing. The kind of conversation that slips past your guard without you noticing. I told him about my old college dreams. About the way I used to love to dance. About how I hadn't danced in years. He told me about his parents. His childhood summers. His failed marriage, the silence, the distance, the nights he'd lie awake next to someone who felt 1,000,000 miles away. The candlelight flickered between us, making shadows dance on the walls. It felt like time had slowed down, like the storm outside was pausing just for us. At one point, I laughed, really laughed, at something he said. And he looked at me in that way again. That way that made me feel like I was the only thing in the room that mattered. I looked away, suddenly aware of how close we were sitting. I could feel the heat from his arm next to mine. The softness in his voice had shifted. Slowed. Deepened. Then came that moment. That one moment that lingers longer than it should. I reached for my glass and our hands touched. Just for a second. But I didn't pull away. Neither did he. His thumb brushed mine. Barely a touch. But it sent something through me I hadn't felt in so long I almost didn't recognize it. Desire. Real. Immediate. Dangerous. I should have moved. I should have made a joke. Changed the subject. Anything. But I didn't. I stayed still. Frozen and burning all at once. He leaned in slowly. Gave me every second to stop him. And I didn't. His lips met mine gently, almost like he was asking a question. I kissed him back. It was soft. Careful. But full of something I'd buried, something raw and human and aching. I pulled back, breath caught in my throat. My mind screaming this is wrong, but my body, my heart, just sat there, completely still. I wanted to stop. I wanted to go home. But I didn't. I stayed. We didn't speak for a long time. Just sat there, candlelight flickering across the room, rain tapping steadily against the windows. I heard the sound of my own breathing. His. The crackle of a candle burning too close to the wick. It all felt too real. Too vivid. Like I'd stepped into someone else's story and lost the way back. Because in that moment, something shifted. Something I couldn't undo. And what happened next? It unraveled everything I thought I knew. Subscribe to Heartfelt Tales Unfold to stay on this unforgettable journey. The morning after, everything felt different. But nothing looked different. The sky was clear again. The rain had passed. The streets were dry. The world had gone back to normal, like it didn't know what I'd done. Like it hadn't seen me cross a line I'd sworn I never would. I woke up in my own bed. Greg was already up, downstairs, making coffee like it was any other Sunday. I heard the clink of the mug, the soft hum of the news on TV. All so ordinary. But I didn't feel ordinary. I felt hollow. Like something had been ripped open inside me and left exposed to the air. I didn't sleep at all that night. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying every second. The kiss. The silence. The fact that I stayed. I'd told myself I'd never be that kind of woman. That no matter how lonely I felt, I would never do anything. That I could handle it. That I could keep it under control. But control is a funny thing. It slips quietly when your heart's been starving for too long. Jason texted me that morning. Just one message. I'm sorry if I crossed a line. Last night meant something to me. But if it didn't to you, I'll understand. I read it. Once. Twice. 3 times. And then I deleted it. Not because I didn't care, but because I cared too much. I sat on the edge of my bed and cried. Quiet, silent tears. The kind you can't explain to anyone. Because there's no good reason for them. Just a tangled mess of guilt, grief, and something that still felt dangerously close to longing. At breakfast, Greg looked at me a little longer than usual. His eyes lingered on mine like he was trying to remember something. Maybe the way I used to smile. Maybe the way we used to be. You okay? He asked, mid-sip of his coffee. I nodded. Too quickly. Too firmly. He didn't press. And that hurt even more. Because if he'd asked again, maybe I would have told the truth. But he didn't. He just moved on to the news, the weather, his schedule for the week. As if I hadn't gone missing somewhere inside myself. The kids started noticing things too. I caught my daughter staring at me during dinner, her fork hovering midair. My son asked if something was wrong with the food. It wasn't. I'd just forgotten the salt. Forgotten I was cooking at all. They didn't have the words for it, but they felt it. That something had shifted. That mom wasn't quite there. I avoided Jason after that. Crossed the street when I saw him walking Baxter. Took a different route home from the store. Stopped lingering near the window. But one afternoon, I caught him in his driveway, loading something into his car. He looked up and saw me before I could turn away. Our eyes met. He didn't smile. He didn't wave. He just stood there. There was something in his expression I hadn't seen before. Not hurt. Not anger. Resignation. Like he'd accepted that whatever had happened between us, whatever could have happened, was over. The worst part was, I didn't even know if that was what I wanted. Word started getting around. Quiet, sideways glances at the mailbox. An offhand comment from a neighbor about how late they saw me leaving Jason's during the storm. Nothing direct. Just enough to make me feel like the ground was shifting beneath my feet. I tried to pretend I didn't notice. Smiled at the gossipers. Held my chin high. But inside, I was unraveling. Jason stopped texting. He pulled back. And the space he left behind was deafening. I thought I'd feel relieved. That distance would make it easier. But all it did was highlight just how far I'd drifted from my husband, from my kids, from the version of myself I used to recognize. Everything was the same. And nothing was. And for the first time, I couldn't tell if I'd made a mistake, or if I'd simply exposed the one that had been there all along. The days that followed moved slowly, like time had thickened somehow. I went through the motions: dishes, laundry, school drop-offs, dinner prep, but my mind wasn't there. It was somewhere else. Somewhere quieter, darker. Somewhere I couldn't quite pull myself out of. I kept asking myself the same questions over and over. Was it love? Was it just an escape? Or was it something even messier, just a desperate grab for validation? For proof that I still mattered to someone? That I was still seen, still wanted, still alive in a world where I'd started to disappear? I didn't have answers. Just echoes. Echoes of Jason's voice, his touch, his silence. I kept thinking about the way he looked at me that night in the candlelight. Like I was the only person in the room. Like I was someone worth holding. It had been so long since anyone looked at me like that. Greg used to. I know he did. When we were young. When everything was still new and full of possibility. But somewhere along the way, life crowded in. Work. Kids. Responsibility. And whatever we had between us slipped through the cracks of routine and exhaustion. I don't think he stopped loving me. But he stopped seeing me. And in those quiet, lonely moments when Jason did, I let myself fall into that warmth. Even if it wasn't mine to take. I've only felt guilt this sharp once before at my mother's funeral. I'd arrived late. Missed the final minutes of the service because I was stuck in traffic. And I remember standing there, surrounded by flowers and silence, hating myself for not being there when it mattered most. That same weight settled on me now. Heavy. Gnawing. Unforgiving. I thought about telling Greg. So many times. I'd picture it, his face. The disbelief. The pain. The anger. Maybe even indifference, which somehow scared me more than all the rest. I'd sit across from him at dinner, staring at his hands, thinking, say it now. Just get it over with. But the words would stick to the roof of my mouth like glue. Because what would I even say? I kissed a man who isn't you, but it felt more intimate than anything we've shared in years. I didn't sleep with him, but I thought about it. I wanted to. Or maybe just the simple truth. I'm not okay. And I haven't been for a long time. But every time I opened my mouth, I chose silence. And then, a few days later, Jason texted me again. I didn't mean to fall for you. That was all. One sentence. It hit like a punch to the chest. Not because I didn't feel something for him, because I did. But because it wasn't supposed to happen. Any of it. I stared at the message. My thumb hovering over the screen. And then I deleted it. Again. Not because I didn't want to respond. But because I knew if I did, I'd be pulled right back in. And I wasn't sure I'd have the strength to climb back out a second time. I sat in the bathroom afterward, door locked, water running to hide the sound, and cried until my face felt raw. How do you mourn something you were never supposed to have? How do you grieve a connection that was real but wrong? How do you carry the weight of a choice that felt like a lifeline in one moment and a betrayal in the next? I thought that was the last I'd hear from him. I thought deleting the message meant closure. But I was wrong. If you've ever found yourself emotionally drifting towards someone you shouldn't have, someone who wasn't yours, someone who looked at you the way you used to dream of being looked at, what did you do? Did you stop it before it went too far? Did you tell someone? Did you carry it quietly, like a secret carved into your heart? Because that's what I've been doing, carrying it. Some days, I wonder if I did the right thing by pulling away. Other days, I wonder if I should have done more. Fought for something that felt real. even if it was wrong. And the truth is, I still don't know. I don't know if I made the right choice. But I do know this. I'm not the only one. I'm not the only one who's felt invisible in their own home. I'm not the only one who's longed for connection in places it shouldn't have been found. And I'm not the only one who's made a decision that still lingers in the quiet moments when no one else is watching. So if you've ever been there, if your heart's ever wandered while your body stayed still, I want to hear your story. Please, share it in the comments. You never know who needs to read it, who needs to feel a little less alone. And if this story touched something in you, if it made you feel seen, even just for a moment, like, comment, and subscribe to Heartfelt Tales Unfold, where we tell the stories you'll never forget. Because sometimes, the ones we can't forget are the ones we've lived in silence.